tee up a question that goes to a fundamental issue, I think, that involves all finance, which is valuation. The last decade, we've seen two violent swings in sectors, arguably bubbles created. And I want to ask, and I'll give this one to Andrew first, and then ask the other panelists to comment. When you're working in a sector and you start to see valuations stretch to what you believe are unsustainable levels, how do you address that as a manager?
I think that what we're seeing in the hospitality industry and the hotel industry is that we're seeing hotels that were purchased, and let me give a little bit of background on that. When you purchase a hotel, generally the valuation of the hotel is based on RevPAR, or revenue per available room, and the expectation of what those revenues are going to be, what the history of the property might show, and the expectation of what they're going to be in the future. So debt is then based on that. A lot of times there are terms in loan agreements that will be based on you being able to maintain a certain level of RevPAR above the debt service. And what we're seeing is a pretty substantial decline in revenue per available room over this last year. Currently, Smith Travel and Research, who is the biggest agency, or it's the only real agency in the hospitality industry that tracks this for all hotels in the U.S., they're projecting another 15% decline in RevPAR over the next year, which in turn will make it somewhere between 20 and 25% declines over 2 years ago. So properties that were purchased prior to that had a much bigger expectation of RevPAR than what they're actually coming in at today. So a lot of times those debt services are being triggered where there are clauses in the debt that's being triggered that is showing that you don't necessarily have the RevPAR to sustain the debt. So in managing that over the last year, it's virtually impossible to refinance at this point. The only ways that you can really manage that are having cash infusions or trying to restructure some portion of the debt service, whether that be a mezzanine loan that might exist on the property, or one that you're able to get in order to almost protective advance that original debt service. So getting creative, and what I'm finding is that the more creative you can get, the better you are, because the standard options in recent times are not out there like they were in the past. And Marvin and I were speaking just a moment ago, actually, on the early 90s and up through 1990, where, if you'll repeat your quote for me, I thought it was great. The dollar.
In the early 90s or the late 80s, the average in real estate was $1 borrowed is $1 earned, and $1 paid back is $1 lost forever.
And that certainly that's certainly not the case right now, because you're not going to be able to leverage a property at 100% like you were back in that day, or even at the 80% or 75% that we were able to do it just in recent years. So larger amounts of cash are necessary in order to really keep these properties going and to create these new deals that are coming up in the current environment.
Well, I think actions speak a lot louder than words, and the action we took as consultants, his values. We were doing the relate cycle. We didn't know how late we should relate, and what tends to happen in real estate, I'm not sure if it happens in all the other sectors, maybe a little bit in finance, but everybody in here may be aware, particularly on Miller, a couple of guys who won the Nobel Prize, essentially economics proving that changes in the capital structure don't affect the weighted average cost of capital. And one of the underlying tenets of that is that when you take on higher levels of risk, you should expect higher levels of return. And that seems basic. In real estate, what happens late cycle, when things get frothy, is we step out and take higher levels of risk, and we underwrite lower levels of return. And that dynamic is just fundamentally flawed. late cycle, and when you're late cycle, the right decisions to make, if you don't have a sell opportunity, the right decisions to make are to pull back, to use less debt, to do fewer deals. But if we, as a public company, were to tell our investors, you know, we think we're late cycle, we're going to do fewer deals, we're going to borrow less money, they would all say, that's very smart, and they would turn around and sell our stock because everybody else was making money. The alignment of interest in our thought process aren't always cohesive. And so what we should do is actually think more, and instead we continue to do rather than think. And I think that's a big problem that gets in real estate late cycle.
Comments about cycle?
I would just respond to Margaret's comment. I hadn't thought about the capital asset pricing model in 15 years. But when you think about that, thanks for bringing it up, but you know, you think about it, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, I think that primarily works in a free market. It's a free market model. And if you get into industries that have over or high degrees of regulation, then inherently, I believe you're messing with that risk-reward kind of equation. Because you may be operating in your mind under a certain assumption, if I step out and take more risk and start a company or buy a company or whatever, but if it's a highly regulated industry and that messes up the supply, demand, and valuation component, then inherently you may be playing by different rules. And so I think that's one of the challenges, particularly from my industry perspective, which is heavily regulated in healthcare. You think about, you know, what's going to solve the problem? Is it going to be government or is it going to be free market? Well, it's going to be a combination of that. So I would challenge you as students in that industry to think of what's the right balance.